On today's podcast, Sam Pittman discusses Madden Iamaleava's transfer away from Arkansas. The Razorbacks' new transfer quarterback from Florida State talks about spring practice. We'll have Christina Long in studio to talk about all of that. We'll also look ahead to the Razorbacks in the NFL draft tonight and the Razorbacks baseball series at Florida this weekend. But first, a word from Kendall King.
At Kendall King, we're proud of over 4 decades of design. We're continuing the legacy of great creative design by combining our brands of Kendall King, Soapbox, and Shopcart. Together, these brands represent a new focus in marketing design with individual attention to specific areas. Through our design expertise supported by a team of talented professionals, we showcase our best. We are Kendall King, we are Soapbox, we are Shopcart, we are design.
It's almost the weekend, Friday, lots of things going on here. Arkansas football coach Sam Pittman discussed spring football yesterday. We've got NFL draft going on tonight. Does Landon Jackson get taken tonight? We'll talk about that. Arkansas baseball starts its series at Florida at 5:30 this evening at Condren Ballpark in Gainesville. Big softball series this weekend, too. The Razorbacks playing a Texas A&M team down in College Station, ranked number 2. The Aggies were number 1 last week. They didn't lose a series. They just didn't beat Missouri by enough in the finale, so they ended up dropping from 1 to 2. Christina Long here in studio with me. We'll start with Sam Pittman and what he had to say yesterday. I guess I was a little surprised, Christina, that he addressed Madden Iamaleava because I did not think that he was going to say anything about it going into this news conference.
Right, I wasn't sure if he would either, and I think the main thing was that I can't remember who. It might have been Tom Murphy. I can't remember who exactly asked the question, but somebody asked, basically just what did you make of his transfer? They didn't ask about what did you think about Hunter Yurachek's statement about possibly, the veiled threat to sue if he doesn't pay the money back. What do you make of all that? Which that would have been something that he probably wouldn't have commented on and would have been able to say, that's not my domain because it's technically not as the head coach. That's a legal matter that I can't comment on. But yeah, he did, I think he handled it well. I think he, sort of took the high road. I was listening to somebody was talking about it and how it's hard to talk about things like this sometimes because you don't want to turn off other players from coming to you. So you can't come off as too anti-player compensation or, angry at players for seeking compensation. And he said that. He said, I can't, I don't blame players for, leaving. He basically, his frustration is that there's 2 transfer portal windows. He doesn't like that. He said that throughout spring, not even just, before Madden transferred. He's talked about the fact that he thinks there should be 1 window and he likes the idea of a January, 1 window in January. And he talked about how he thinks it's a problem that there's 2 windows. And he talked about how, I thought he made a good point where he touched on the fact that he was like, these players have the opportunity twice a year and, twice a year they get the chance to potentially go make more money. And he basically said, I don't know what all of us would do in that situation, especially for a coach, a coach that gets paid lots of money, coaches that are always kind of making deals, I thought that was a fair approach to it. But yeah, I was a little surprised that he talked about it to the extent that he did. He didn't, reveal any great inner workings of how this went down, and I didn't expect him to. But he did talk about it a little bit more than I thought he would.
And here's the full soundbite from Sam Pittman.
A lot of times where there's smoke, there's fire. And, we had heard some rumors to that. But, there's always rumors going around. So I don't know that I was totally surprised. Guys, the portal, and I know Nico was high profile, but I'm not. I don't want to blame the players. I don't for leaving. I mean, you can say, well, he was here 3 months and blah blah blah. But the opportunity to leave is there twice a year. The money to leave for more money is there twice a year. And I'm not positive what we all would do in that situation. So he handled it well, came in and visited with me about it, handled it well, and talked to me about it, and then decided to go in the portal. So obviously, as soon as that happened, then we go find somebody to replace him.
Sam Pittman on Madden Iamaleava. He's going to be who he is, and that's who he is. I feel like, well, two things. Number one, I feel like the public persona that he gives off is a lot more laid back than I think he probably is in practice or in the offices. I think that he's a lot more, I don't know what the word is, maybe aggressive than maybe you would think by watching his news conferences. I also think that there would have been a lot of fans who would have been okay with, hey, coach, just go get him.
Yeah.
Let him have it
Absolutely.
for
I don't think
leaving
anyone
in the
would have
middle
blamed
of
him.
this because this is I don't think anybody wants this precedent set. Now, I guess the Pandora's box is open, but this precedent set where, hey, you come in and you're only making a commitment to us for 3 months now, as opposed to even a year. I mean, it's just it's ridiculous the route that everything's going in college football.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting, to your point about how he is in practice and in his office and things like that. I don't imagine that Madden came in, said, hey, coach, I'm going to leave, and Sam just said, okay, and patted him on the back. I imagine there was more of a conversation. He did say it matters to Pittman a lot that players leave the right way. He talked about that when the postseason window was open. He talked about how, hey, if a guy leaves the right way, if he handles it well and he wants to come back, we would be open to that. So I think that goes a long way with him, being willing to have the conversation. But he did say kind of at the end, somebody asked about, he had mentioned that.
I've got this soundbite.
Okay, yeah, he mentioned that they heard rumors, and somebody asked, well, what do you do when you hear rumors? Do you try to get them to stay? So if we want to play that clip.
Well, and I thought that this clip, I'll tee it up while Sydney pulls it up. It's kind of telling because it basically confirms what I think everybody knows, that there's tampering in college football, and we'll discuss it after you hear this from Sam Pittman.
No, I mean, what we found pretty much, if a guy wants to go in the portal, he's going to go, and he already knows where he's going. He knows what he's going to make. So at that point, words, they don't come out green, and at that point, you probably lost them at that point. And so we just tried not to make them out and have a molehill coach the guys like we should coach them and be respectful and try to get them better. And if it happens, it happens. At that point, if you want them to stay, you certainly try to talk them out of it and talk to them about their position coach, what the scheme can do to develop them and all those type things. But if they've made up their mind to leave, they're going to leave.
So when they come to transfer, they know where they're going. They know what they're going to make. This is like the girlfriend who breaks up with you, and then the next day she's with somebody else and says, oh, well, we just figured this out on Wednesday.
Exactly.
No, you didn't.
And it's funny because this is actually similar to what he said when early in the spring when he was asked, are you still going to have a spring game? When a lot of schools were saying they're not going to have a spring game or they're not going to televise it or whatever because they don't want people to know they're good players that are lower on the depth chart and can come get them. And he basically said, I don't buy into that because if they want your player, they've already got him. By the time the spring game comes around, they already know about him and they're already working on it. And I think some group of 5 coaches have said similar things because their rosters are getting rated all the time, and they basically said, what are we gonna do? We're gonna have a spring practice. It's already happening. And so I think it's interesting that this is. He's talked about this before in a different context, but about how if somebody wants your guy or if your guy wants to leave, they're gonna do it.
And then you compare that to a sports league with sensibility like the NFL. You become a free agent, and there's a negotiating window for your team, an exclusive window to where they have to negotiate with you. That window closes, and then you can go out and you can talk to others. But then, I believe your team has a chance to match. Is that the qualifying offer? I think what it's called. It's just it baffles me how college football, and maybe they will figure out their stuff one day, but they haven't figured it out yet. How they have not figured out how to make this process more regimented, like how to rein in just the craziness of it all. Because that's what's driving people out of football. That's what's driving coaches out of football. That's why Nick Saban's on the NFL draft last night. Instead of getting his Alabama team ready for, whatever Alabama's doing right now. But, Yeah, it's driving good people out of the sport, and
It's driving fans away.
It's driving, and I don't know that it's driving. We had Ben Portnoy on the show earlier this week, and he was talking about, well, college football ratings are as high as they've ever been, and the popularity is as high as it's ever been. And I feel like that can be a little bit of a fool's gold, because I think it's one of those deals where, on the surface, everything looks fine, but underneath there's a lot of corrosion going on.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like you can have a nice house and you can have termites eating it up underneath, and eventually it ain't going to look so nice. And I think that's kind of what's going on with college football right now. Is just there's just no regulation to all this mess, and it's going to eventually, unless they can figure this thing out, it's going to hurt the long-term health of the sport.
Yeah, it's just so much has happened that has led to the lack of control that there is now. Part of it was, I listened to a podcast that was talking about how Tennessee is so upset about all this, lack of control and all these crazy things that have happened with Nico. And part of what allowed that, not the entire reason, but a contributing factor was Tennessee's lawsuit. Tennessee's lawsuit that kept the NCAA from preventing what few guardrails, or from enforcing what few guidelines they had with regards to NIL policy. And so basically when that happened, the NCAA has no ability to enforce anything. And that's part of why it is so sort of crazy right now, why it feels like there's no regulation, no oversight, and no rules, because there can't be. And I think, ultimately an employment model of some kind would probably solve some of these problems. I don't think we're there. I don't think we're going to be there for a little while, but I do think eventually there's so many things that that they cannot do without an employment model that if they could do them would kind of help. A lot of it has to do with collective bargaining, which that's a whole other thing where even if you have an employment model, it's still difficult, because how do you collectively bargain with people that are, only there for 4 or 5 years? There's so much turnover, and it is such a large group of people. It's not like the NFL where it's a little bit more finite. Are so many players on so many teams. This is such a large organization, plus the fact that it turns over pretty quickly. So there's a whole host of problems with that too, and so there's just no clear answer as we've seen. There's no silver bullet or whatever you want to call it.
We work for the Hussman family. The Walter E. Hussman Corporation is who owns our newspaper here. And could you imagine if like we went in and we told the Hussman family, hey, we're in charge now? That's kind of what's going on with college football. It's like the players, the coaches, the leadership, they're not in charge anymore. They cannot enforce a single rule and they don't want to call them employees, but let's call it what it is. They're getting paid to perform. Like, they can't enforce any rules upon these players. And there's not another business or entity out there that I know of that exists where the leadership cannot enforce anything upon the workers. And again, I know they don't want to call them workers, but that's what they are. And it's crazy. It is just a maddening time.
Yeah. And I think, we talked about how it's pushing fans away. I think you're right about the fact that TV viewership is different, because we hear from fans, on our message board. We hear from fans in comments, in person sometimes, about how sometimes it just feels like it's not, what's it all for? Because everything's getting more expensive. I was talking about this on the radio yesterday. Everything's more expensive. So if you want to go to a game, if you want to buy the merch, if you want to bring your family, your kids want concessions, whatever, that's going to cost you a lot of money to do. And B, you feel less connected to the team sometimes because you don't know a lot of them. There's not a lot of Cam Balls and Eric Gregory's that are here for 5-6 years, that are here the whole time. There's not a lot of them. You get to know some of them a little bit. I think fans like Taylon Green, fans, you get a few that you get to know a little bit. Some guys that kind of become the face of the team. But that does take time. You kind of have to build the relationship with the fans a little bit, and different players do it differently. And I think the team kind of picks a few to kind of promote a little bit to kind of form that. And that's why I think Pittman wanted to have the spring game and wanted to get to do the autograph session, because it's important that fans are invested a little bit in the team, that they get to know these guys a little bit and feel like they are their team. But fans feel less connected to the people on the team, and they have to pay way more to go see a team they don't even know. And I think that people are really frustrated by that. I don't think it's the case for everyone. like I said on the radio, I don't think you're going to see all of a sudden nobody's coming to games anymore. I think it's, you might see lost interest over the course of years if this, continues as it is. I don't think you're going to see, a boycotting of football games and things like that. But I just think you might see, younger generations might not take to it the way that we did when we were younger. And so I just think it's something that we could see over time. But I think the TV aspect is different. But at the same time, TV seems to be a lot of what they care about it now. So
yeah, I wonder about the 40 and over crowd.
Yeah.
Like as the 40 and over crowd dies off, or retires, and they don't have the money to put back into the teams. Like what happens at that point? Because I don't know that the 35 and under crowd is nearly as invested. I don't think they're as invested at all. You can look at student sections across the country.
Oh, yeah.
Think about what the student section was like whenever I went to school. You'd go there and you'd stay the whole game. Now you go there and you stay for I guess until you get hot. I don't know how this works, but and it's not just Arkansas. It's Nick Saban would get upset with the Alabama students because they'd leave games. They'd get disinterested, even in competitive games, and so. It'll be interesting to see how this changes. Again, I think it's one of those things where it looks nice and shiny and pretty right now on the surface. There's a lot of stuff going on underneath that's hurting this sport. Arkansas ended up. Did they sign Trever Jackson yesterday?
Yes.
Or did they? Okay, so he is a Florida State transfer quarterback, 6'3", 187 pounds. I believe he was a walk-on.
Yeah,
at Florida
apparently,
State.
even though he was a 4-star out of high school, but walked on to a program he wanted to be at.
And so he's going to be on scholarship here at Arkansas. Let's see here. He says, I'm reading Richard Davenport's story here. 4-star recruit, as Christina mentioned, played against Charleston Southern as a freshman last year. Mostly was Florida State's scout team quarterback. I don't think he's Madden Iamaleava.
No, he's not. But, I mean, they had to get somebody, I'm sure they didn't just choose somebody out of a hat. They looked at him. They wanted him. They had another guy, Blake Boda, that was on scholarship go in the portal yesterday. So, maybe you replace him with a walk-on quarterback or something just to have the bodies. But, I don't think this is, like you said, this isn't Madden Iamaleava. I'll be interested what he looks like in practice. I think maybe we'll get to see some more Grayson Wilson in fall camp. Madden was running the third-team offense. Somebody's got to do that now. Who that's going to be will be interesting. I would like to see, if Grayson Wilson gets an opportunity, because he was the guy that kind of got, I don't know if I'm allowed to say got screwed over by Madden's
got fewer
flip.
reps.
Yes, exactly. And he was, he was in the class a long time, in-state guy. It was kind of bad optics when Madden flipped on day of, and somebody asked Grayson if he knew about it, and he was like, nope, had no idea, but that's basically, that's how the game works. I'm going to compete and whatever. And he didn't really get that much of an opportunity. So, I mean, it would be good to see him get some reps in fall for sure.
This is what Sam Pittman had to say yesterday about the Razorbacks getting the commitment of Trever Jackson from Florida State.
I think he comes in here and fits exactly what we're looking for. When we lost Madden, I think he was in there vying for the 3 spot and all that. And I think Trever will come up and be able to do that and continue to get better and press KJ and Talon and be a player for us in either near future or future that could be a really good player for us.
Again, it's about getting warm bodies. I feel like in the spring transfer portal. I don't have there been a whole lot, because I can't think of any, if many, players who have come in the spring, come in after the spring, and really contributed to the team.
There were several last year. I know Larry Worth was one. He was a big one.
But I mean, like in a major way. I mean, like what you're talking about are players who are key role players. I mean, has there really been anybody that's come in after the spring portal and been a major significant factor for the football team?
I mean, I don't know. I guess we have different definitions of a significant factor. You're not usually going to get like a quarterback from, and that was something that somebody asked, was it's really hard to bring a quarterback in after spring. And that's something
they need defensive linemen.
Yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. I mean, do we think that any of these defensive linemen they go out are really going to be, key? Like, I'm sure they're going to be rotational players,
right.
but are they going to be guys who, you step back and go, whoa, we really found a diamond in the rough right there.
I mean, you hope so, but I think the chances are certainly less. I don't think Landon Jackson's in this group,
Walking through that door. But I guess where I'm going with that is it feels like those types of players are the ones who are getting in the portal after the season ends or when the teams are preparing for bowl games or whatever the case might be, and they're the ones that you're getting to go through spring ball with you. And I don't know, it just feels like it feels very rushed when you get players in after the spring portal.
Yeah. I'm trying to find who all. It all runs together. Who all comes at what time? But I think there were a few defensive guys last year because I remember them coming in and being like, I don't trust that any of these people are going to be, notable contributors. That have come in the spring window, but a few of them were. But I think Larry Worth's the one that stands out the most. I'm trying to find who all actually joined in the spring. But it's hard when you spend spring at another program. It's difficult when you spend time, especially guys that stop over at a school for spring. We talked about Danny Saili before about how he went to BYU just for spring and then left again. And so I think that's difficult. I think it's just hard to be new, and so it takes a lot more. You always want to evaluate well, but you really need to in spring if you're trying to get somebody that you think can really contribute.
Mm-hmm. It'd be like if because we're in the middle of baseball season, it'd be like if the portal opened in November and you added somebody who didn't go through fall ball with you. I mean, the expectations of that person really fitting into what you're trying to do is just really difficult. Sam Pittman was asked yesterday, we got another soundbite to play here, about Arkansas's remaining portal needs. The portal, I believe, is it tonight that it closes at
For
midnight?
football, yes. Mm-hmm.
But you can still sign players out of there, obviously. But so nobody can get in after midnight tonight. This is what he had to say about what Arkansas is looking for remaining portal players.
Well, we're going to use our 85 scholarships, and it's still fluid, to be honest with you, about the 105 anticipation of the 105. You can do it two different ways. You can bring 120 into camp if you want and cut 15 the day before the Alabama A&M game, but you're not giving them a choice. I think now if you're having some conversations with them guys who may not make the 105, at least you're giving them a choice to get in, to the portal. So we're kind of actively doing that now and have this week. So it would be, the number could be maybe 3 or 4 more or less depending on scholarship numbers that we have.
So Sam Pittman on what the Razorbacks are looking for in the portal. I would not want to be a football coach.
I know.
It's just the mad dash to figure out how you're going to put together an 85-man roster. And it probably not look really what you would like an 85-man roster to look like. It's got to be frustrating beyond all belief.
Right, especially right now when the house settlement thing is in limbo, and that's something that they were trying to get ready to have to be at 105 total, and now the judge is saying, well, actually, you might not have to do that now. You need to do this grandfathering in system, and eventually you'll have 105, but for now you can keep people. And it's like, well, we've already been cutting people. And to Pittman's point, Arizona State's coach, talked about this the other day, and I saw online, earned a lot of praise for it. And it was the same thing we'd heard from Pittman before about if we're going to be, he didn't use the word cutting, but if they're going to be cutting players, especially walk-ons, they want to do it now. They don't have to do it now, but they want to do it now so that they have the opportunity to transfer if they want to keep playing. And so if you wait until the summer, which you can do, you don't have to be down to that 105 until I think that either camp or the season starts. I'm not sure which. But basically until the fall, you could cut guys then, but then they have nowhere to go. There's nothing that they can do. And so they want to, give them the opportunity to go play somewhere else. So it's super in flux right now, especially with the settlement issue and just where these roster limits are going to be. It's honestly, I don't know how they even know who is supposed to be on the roster and who doesn't.
Here, by the way, this to answer your question, I looked this up. The players who came in after the spring last year, Larry Worth, Rodney Hill, Anthony Switzer, Joe Moore, Stephen Dix, Blake Boda, Danny Saili, Shafre Brown, I think, say his name right?
Yeah, he's gone now.
And Tyrell Reed. Well, I think a lot of them are gone now.
So 4 of those played, substantial snaps.
Let me ask you this. Are you going to remember any of those players in 3 years?
Larry Worth, yes. Larry Worth is like one of my favorite players on this team. I also think Stephen Dix is really good.
Look, I've forgotten a lot of them.
That's because you
just
haven't
from
covered spring
season.
football.
Yeah, that's true.
I think Stephen Dix matters a lot. I think Anthony Switzer, probably won't remember him as much, but he was important. They needed him. I think Larry Worth, yes. Rodney Hill, maybe. Rodney Hill will get some, he'll get carries, but I don't think, like you said, he'll be like a remember some guys guy later.
Yeah.
I'm very nice guy, like Rodney Hill a lot.
You're not remembering these guys like the ones that you've watched play for all
Sure,
those
no,
years.
it is different for sure, and I also think that them getting this many guys that did contribute as much last year in the spring window is rare. I don't think that that's common, and I don't think you're going to see that every year or on every team.
All right, when we come back, we're going to talk Razorback baseball. They're at Florida this weekend. Also, NFL draft. What happened last night? What might happen tonight and tomorrow with Razorbacks? But first, a word from Kendall King.
At Kendall King, we're proud of over 4 decades of design. We're continuing the legacy of great creative design by combining our brands of Kendall King, Soapbox, and Shopcart. Together, these brands represent a new focus in marketing design with individual attention to specific areas. Through our design expertise supported by a team of talented professionals, we showcase our best. We are Kendall King, we are Soapbox, we are Shopcart, we are design.
Hey, welcome back. Want to tell you about Bentonville Glass. They've been serving their community since 1971. Committed, professional, versatile. If you're looking for a quality leader in Northwest Arkansas or looking for skilled craftsmanship, look no further than Bentonville Glass for all your glass market needs with the highest quality products. Come by and see them now at 507 South Main in Bentonville or online at bentonvilleglass.com. I want to tell you, too, you can get the latest breaking news on all Razorback sports at wholehogsports.com. Most in-depth source for all Razorback sports, analysis, latest in recruiting, unique stories on all your favorite teams. Subscribe today at wholehogsports.com. You can subscribe to our podcast by searching Whole Hog Sports on Apple, or you can find the video version of our podcast on our Whole Hog Sports YouTube page. One more note about the players. Maybe a Larry Worth and a Steven Dix, they have a big year, and I've got a different opinion on them. But what we were saying in the break is that there are so many new players that are coming in. And part of this may just be me and the season of life that I'm in. I've got a 7-year-old, a 5-year-old, and 3-year-old. I got a lot more to keep up with whoever the number 2 linebacker on the football roster is. But I just, if it's a Drew Sanders, I remember Drew Sanders. Other, Jaquindon Jackson. I'll probably remember Jaquindon Jackson a little bit. It takes somebody, I feel like, to come in and really have an impact on the team for them to stick in my mind. I guess that's where I'm going with all
Yeah,
of that.
I think that makes sense. And it's different from – there is a large difference between being a starter or playing a lot and being, a memorable player. And I guess I should say, like with somebody like Larry Worth, in 5 years, I don't know if I'm going to be like thinking about Larry Worth a lot unless, he could have a big season. He could be, whatever. I do think he's one of the faces of this team, which I think helps. But I think, a lot of it will depend what they do this year, right? But I don't think that any of those players just like didn't matter.
It's one of those things where you could have a 2-year football window, and the number of players that contributed to the football team might have been a little over 100. Now it's like 140, 150. I don't know. I mean, it's mass exodus out, mass exodus in every year, and not only every year. Like Pittman was saying, it's twice a year because it's here goes a bunch of people out in December. Here come a bunch of people in January, and then there's a little bit of a trickle out now in the spring, and then I can't keep up.
It's a lot, and that's what I was saying about fans getting frustrated. You got to pay a lot of money, and to see a team who maybe a handful of them. Yeah,
they're here for 3 months, and then they're out the door in a lot of cases, if even that long. Arkansas baseball is at Florida this weekend. The first pitch is 5:30 tonight at Condren Ballpark in Gainesville. I was digging into some numbers yesterday, and one of the things that really stands out to me is that Florida, they ain't that good at home this year. I mean, they got swept by Vanderbilt at home. They got swept by Georgia at home. Their 3 home wins are over.
Missouri,
there you go.
I had to think about it for a second.
Not much to
Who
write.
else but Missouri?
Yeah, not much to write home. Did you see Missouri almost won last night?
I did.
Almost.
Well, they scored all their runs in the first inning, right?
Yeah, they scored. No, actually, I think they scored more than that. They're up 3-0, middle innings. I think Alabama might have hit a 3-run homer, tied the game. Missouri, it was a little bit back and forth there in the middle innings, and then Alabama ended up winning that. Missouri 0-19 now. In SEC play. Boy, it is tough to watch that team right now. On Arkansas and Florida, though, Arkansas's got a team that's been really good away from home. They were an out away against Georgia from having 3 road victory or 3 road series victories this year, all over ranked teams. 2 of 3 over Ole Miss, swept Vanderbilt, obviously lost the 1-run games against Georgia. And you dig into their numbers a little bit, and offensively, they've been really good on the road. So, like, for instance, they've hit 90 home runs in 43 games, but 23 of those 90 home runs have come in their 9 road games. So they had a bunch against Ole Miss, had a bunch against Vanderbilt, had some against Georgia. And Florida, this is a ballpark where teams hit home runs a lot, whether it be Florida, whether it be the visitors. 29 home runs in 9 SEC games this year at Condren Ballpark. 10 have been by Florida. 19 have been by the visiting teams. Georgia went down there. They had 2 games in March where they hit 6 home runs in each game.
Wow. I'd be interested, Arkansas is already a team that hits a lot of home runs, but I'd be interested, and you're more well-versed in SEC ballparks than me, but are the parks that Arkansas has played in on the road, are they also known to be, to play kind of small? Does that factor in at all, or is it really more just the fact that Arkansas is good at hitting home runs in general?
I've never thought of Hawkins Field as being one that plays small, but it played small that weekend with the way the wind was blowing out, especially the left center. Foley Field, I think, well, depends on which way you're hitting the ball. I mean, if you're hitting it to right field, yes, it plays small. You hit to left field, at 350 feet down the line, that's the biggest left or the farthest left field wall in the conference. Ole Miss, again, that was one of those weekends where you got the wind blowing out. It's a good question. It seems to me like most of the SEC parks now are starting to play smaller. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but especially the newer parks, it just feels like they play a little bit smaller than they used to. Maybe that's equipment. Maybe it's, who knows. But this Florida ballpark, I know that in 5 years there, Florida's home run numbers have
really
gone way up, it feels like. And, every year, especially during like the Caglione years, they had big power numbers. And a lot of it was due to what they were doing in their home park. Yeah,
it makes sense. I think this weekend is a pretty good opportunity for Arkansas offensively, just especially looking at the numbers for Florida's pitching staff. I think, they were asking me on the radio yesterday if, the midweek games and the second midweek game this week, the offense wasn't quite as on as it was in the first one. And I kind of think that just happens. I don't think there's a lot to be read into that. And I think that this weekend is a good opportunity for them to kind of show, to score more the way that we've seen them do, especially earlier in the season and earlier in the SEC slate.
So I'm looking at the story I wrote yesterday, and one of these numbers have changed because Georgia played last night and lost to OU in Athens. There's only 3 teams in the SEC that in SEC play only have allowed more runs per game at home than Florida. Missouri, obviously, 13 runs a game.
Wow.
13 runs. I was looking because I thought Florida might be the team that had given up the most runs at home, and I totally just forgot that Missouri probably had been obliterated at home.
That's got to be like an SEC record.
Their score at home this year, the combined score in 9 home games at Missouri, the opponents have scored 116 runs. Missouri has scored 44 at home.
That's insane.
You should see it on the road. It's not very good either. I think it's like 99-29 in road games, and a lot of that's due to what happened here in Fayetteville. Oklahoma went to Columbia, and they scored 46 runs over 3 games on the road against Missouri. So Missouri, let's set them over here to the side.
Outlier.
Ole Miss has allowed 8.1 runs per game at home. Arkansas went in there, really contributed significantly to that. Arkansas scored 30 over 3 games. Georgia, going into last night, had allowed 7.2 runs per game at home. Again, Arkansas went in there, had a few good games. I think they scored 25 over 3 games. And then you have Florida just behind Georgia going into yesterday. Again, these numbers have flipped now after Georgia played that game last night. Florida's allowed 7.1 runs per game at home in SEC play. So they haven't been a very strong home team. And then you look at Arkansas, I mentioned that they've got a good road record this year. I mentioned that they've been pretty good offensively. The number is that they score 8.6 runs per game on the road in the SEC. Only Oklahoma, by virtue mainly of what they did to Missouri at 9 runs per game, is the only SEC team that has scored more on the road than Arkansas has this year.
Wow, that's really. I didn't realize that they had been that strong on the road as far as the offense goes. But I mean, it makes sense. I feel like there have been several games where it seemed like they hit enough to win, and then they gave up a little too much in these series losses they've had now. But I mean, yeah, I think this weekend is a good opportunity. I don't know a lot about the Florida offense and how they match up as far as Arkansas's pitching goes.
We'll see. I mean, they've got some good numbers. They got they've got 5 hitters who are hitting 315 or better overall. I think they've got 4 who are hitting over 300 in conference play. So, like Colby Shelton, I mean, that guy's a double machine. He's a really good player. He's part of that group, and I've talked about him a couple of times this week. You think about Shelton, Ethan Petrie, Jace LaViolette, Ike Irish. They all came in together in that same class.
Yeah.
And they've been, really good ever since basically they stepped foot on campus. So he's good. Brady Donay, he's a good player. He's the one who got deked by Peyton Holt last year.
Oh yeah,
on the play at Baum. Yeah, he was the one that was at third base and got faked out. But he's hitting 341 for the season. So I mean, they've got good hitters. Their problem this year has been their hitting, or I'm sorry, their pitching. The pitching's been their problem, and a lot of it has to do with the fact that they've got some injuries, like Pierce Coppola, who was going to be one of, if not their number 1, their number 2 starter this year. He's been out pretty much the entire season, since I think maybe his 3rd outing of the year. So they don't have him. They've got some other injuries that have, it may not be where they're out right now, but maybe they're not totally back either, if you know what I mean, from a pitching standpoint. So they're going to go, they've got a Game 1 starter and a Game 2 starter announced, and then they're not going to announce a Game 3, and that's kind of how they've handled things the last few weeks, because I think, kind of their deal is that, number one, their starters have been giving up so many runs that they've been having to use a lot of bullpen pieces. So I feel like if you're Arkansas, now granted, Landon Bindelsees is on the mound in Game 3, and he's a pitcher that's been prone to give up home runs this year. I think that's a little bit worrisome. But I think if you're Arkansas, from an offensive standpoint, going into that Game 3, if you're in a 1-1 situation in this series, I think or 2-0 or whatever the case might be, I feel like you got to feel pretty good about your chances to take that Game 3 rubber game if it is 1-1 going in, because just based on what we've seen from Florida last week, they played at Mississippi State. Game 3, they lost 14-8. I mean, these have been big numbers that they're giving up on the back half of the weekend.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think Bindelsees does give you a pretty good opportunity. And, ideally you have the bullpen in pretty good shape by then, although they probably will have to use a lot of arms in Game 2, just because I expect Gage Wood will still be on a pretty limited pitch count.
Probably about 40.
Okay.
I think that's what Dave said the other day, about 40. So,
He threw what, 20?
Threw 20.
Okay.
He threw 20 against A&M. So, if he can throw 40, if he's really on, that gets you maybe 2 innings.
Yeah.
If he's not on, who knows what it gets you.
Right.
But if he's on, maybe he gets you a couple of innings. You can set up Ben Bybee for an inning or 2.
That worked great.
And then go get Gabe and see if he can have another performance like he had last week, where he can give you some length out of the bullpen.
Yeah, I thought that was really good to see. I know you and I haven't talked as much about that on the show. I'm sure you and Bubba did. But, with what Gabe Gackle was able to do, and I thought Van Horn made a really interesting point before the appearance and after about, hey, all these accolades that Gabe Gackle got in the preseason were off of his relief appearances or off of what he did as a reliever last year. And so it's interesting to see, how much more comfortable he seems to be there. And, they want that trend to continue. And I'll be curious kind of as they keep him back in that role, what it looks like going forward.
I keep thinking of the word reverse with Gabe Gackle. It's like reverse engineering a start, because you get your starter innings out of the guy that you hope to pitch last. Like last week, I think it was 5 2/3 that he threw against A&M. And then reverse psychology. Okay, so it's not going well for you when you're starting. Let's see if it goes well for you when you come in the 3rd, 4th, 5th inning.
Yeah. It was funny. I was looking through, whenever I'm kind of needing some ideas for design things for the magazine, I'll go to Barnes & Noble and I'll just grab a bunch of sports magazines and flip through them and look at some of the design stuff and how they lay things out. And I picked up I can't remember what it was, but it was it was a college baseball preview magazine. And any mention of Arkansas, there were like so many pictures of Gabe Gackle, and it was so funny just like looking at preseason, and even we talked about it, and Matt Hobbs talked about the quote from Matt Hobbs that you got in our baseball preview issue where he said, what do I say about this? He's the next guy, and I think that's still true. I think he can still be really good. I think if they want him to start, they can keep working on it, but it's not what we thought it was going to be, but that doesn't have to mean that it's bad or a disaster for him.
You don't have to be starting to be the guy.
Yes.
Look at what Kevin Cox did.
He was
the guy. Yeah. So, it's great when you can have an Isaiah Campbell, a Blaine Knight, a Connor Nolan, somebody like Hagan, but it doesn't have to work that way. It's nice when you have guys in front of the guy, maybe. So I was looking up some numbers, too. Arkansas at Florida, this is the longest that they have gone without a win, a series win on the road at Florida. Of course, they beat Vanderbilt earlier this year, snapped a 15-year streak. So now Florida has become the longest. 2012, the last time Arkansas won a series at Florida. Of course, that was at the old ballpark, McKeithen Stadium, that shut down after the 2020 season. Arkansas has lost 3 in a row series at Florida, and that's tied for the longest streak against SEC teams. They've also lost 3 in a row at Georgia after losing the series a couple of weeks ago, and they've lost 3 in a row at A&M. Last won a series at A&M in 2017, last won a series at Georgia in 2015. Here's a little bit of a trivia, maybe trick question for you. What is the last SEC, or what is the longest Arkansas has gone between winning a series at any SEC ballpark?
Ooh. I have no idea because there's a lot that they don't go to that often, so I'm not sure.
Oh, it's OU.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Yeah, I tried to help you by telling you it was a trick question.
Yeah.
OU, 1983, last time they won a series at OU, but that was the only time they played a series at OU. And looking back at that,
that's crazy.
They actually played a series at OU. They played OU twice and then left Norman and drove over to Oklahoma City and played Oklahoma City once and came back to Norman.
How weird.
And played a third time against the Sooners. But that was during the days where, we've heard Van Horn talk about this when he was a player. You used to just go get games wherever you could get them, whenever you could get them, to try to get your numbers built up.
Yeah, now it's totally different.
So Arkansas and Florida tonight, 5:30 on SEC Network Plus. They're going to be on the network tomorrow. It's going to be a 2 o'clock first pitch Central Time, and then they'll be back on SEC Network Plus on Sunday, a noon Central start for the Razorbacks and the Gators. Very interested to see how this game goes. We always say that a series is a pivotal series. This feels like a very pivotal series for both teams. Arkansas needs to get back on track. Florida needs some wins to help its NCAA tournament cause.
Yeah, it's interesting, especially with the SEC now. It feels like every week we've talked about this is a big one. This one's going to be a big test. The only one that felt like it wasn't a big one was Missouri. Not to keep dunking on Missouri. This is just the Missouri hate episode. But no, I think it's just kind of how SEC baseball goes. But I do think it's interesting from both sides because, like you said, Florida needs to start. If they're going to come on, they need to start now. And I think for Arkansas, we've talked before about how with the slate that they have for the rest of the SEC season, this is your best chance to get some wins that you can feel a little more secure going into this series than you do the next 3. So this is one of your easier opportunities to get wins.
Christina's a Missouri grad, by the way. She can. You got a Missouri tattoo?
No, I don't.
No, okay. No. So moving forward.
I should be like Brett Bielema, get a Missouri Tiger on my calf.
He had a Hawkeye.
He has a Hawkeye calf tat.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is weird because he's worked for Wisconsin and
it's so
Illinois
funny.
since then.
Yeah.
So moving on. You didn't watch any of the NFL draft last night, right?
We turned it on for a couple of the 20s picks.
I enjoyed it. I watched it I think I watched it from first pick to last night.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, with a couple of little interruptions, going, eating dinner, stuff like that. But my son has just eat up with it. I mean, he was talking to me about the NFL draft in May of last year. Dad, when's the next draft? Where's it going to be? Can I stay up if the Cowboys win the Super Bowl and watch their pick? Well, I don't think you have to worry about that.
Super Bowl, that's amazing.
Didn't have to worry about that. They picked 12th last night. No Razorbacks in the first round. None were expected to go. There's some thought Landon Jackson might go tonight. There's some second-round grades on him, some third-round grades. I've said this a number of times. I feel, I don't know. I guess I wouldn't be surprised to see him go tonight. I wouldn't be surprised if teams passed on him tonight and waited till tomorrow to take him.
Yeah, I guess I'm expecting him to go tonight mostly because that's what a lot of NFL people have said they expect.
Well, they also said Shadur would go in the first five or six picks.
That was
and
crazy.
he's still waiting.
I didn't realize. I woke up to that this morning. Like I wasn't, like I said, I wasn't really watching the draft all that closely because I figured Arkansas wouldn't have any guys picked. I had notifications on and things, but I had gone to bed, and so I woke up to the Shadur didn't get picked discourse, which is interesting. It's one of the things. I knew as soon as I saw it, I was like, all right, that's what everybody's going to talk about all day long until 7:00 or whenever the draft starts again. But it was funny. The time I did have it on, most of the discussion between picks was, okay, who's going to get Shadur? I watched when the Steelers picked, and they thought the Steelers would take him. And then if it was kind of like, if the Steelers don't, who will?
I guess I wasn't that surprised that he didn't get picked because, you get to a certain point and who needs quarterback? When you're picking like 23 through 32, you're picking there because you were in the playoffs. And if you're in the playoffs, chances are you probably got a pretty good quarterback. And, now I know the Giants came back into the first round to get Jackson Dart.
Which, okay.
I mean, I like Dart. I think he's good.
Yeah.
I know he had the little meltdown against Florida at the end of last year, but with the right coaching, I think he could be a good NFL quarterback. I don't know that the right coaching exists with the Giants, who have been pretty bad with their quarterback development.
Yeah.
But I guess I wasn't too surprised just because I didn't see this year as being one of those years where there's a lot of teams that were in need of a first round quarterback.
And this just isn't that strong of a quarterback class. It's not.
It's not. So Landon, we think that he may go tonight. I'd be surprised if we saw anybody else come off the board tonight. It seems like everybody else is going to be a day three pick tomorrow if they get picked at all. And then you have to watch when the draft ends for all the free agent signings.
And I expect they'll have a lot of undrafted guys go, and we'll track all of that on Whole Hog Sports. Ethan and I have been talking about how we want to do it, and we'll have a file that we update as signings get reported because those always come really fast after the draft ends. But yeah, I think day 3 will be a big day for the Arkansas guys. I think I'm interested to see where Isaac Tisla goes. I'm sure you guys talked about that when you talked draft stuff the other day, but his stock has really risen as he's gone through that draft process, the Senior Bowl, the Combine, Pro Day.
The RAS score.
Yes. The what?
The RAS score.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Okay.
I found out what the RAS score was the other day.
That's so funny. I had to think about that. I had to think about that for a second. No, but yeah, so his RAS score. But yeah, so I'm interested to see where he ends up. I don't think he'll be tonight or anything, but I'll be curious how high he does rise. And then Andrew Armstrong, he's a guy that I feel like a lot of the discourse has been, why is nobody talking about Andrew Armstrong when he was like the SEC's leading receiver? I don't really know what to make of that. I expect he'll get picked, but it'll be later.
I just feel like there's nothing that stands out about Armstrong.
Yeah.
I mean, and I don't mean that in a bad way. It's just I feel like there's probably 20, 30 other receivers who are very comparable to him and in height and college stats and the testing numbers. I just feel like there's he's not a Treylon Burks. He's not a Matthew Golden who got picked. Which, by the way, Matthew Golden's pick. I am far from a Green Bay Packers fan, but I thought that was the coolest part of the draft last night. And I would give ESPN a lot of credit for how they framed it. Because I went back and watched NFL Networks, too. The NFL Network guys wouldn't shut up. Like, even as he's picking, I mean, it's like you're just watching the draft with the boys. They're like, oh, here we go. Oh, the ESPN guys, they laid out. And they just let the moment, let the video and the audio tell the story of what's happening. You got the Packers GM up there. He announces it. Place goes nuts. There's like 200,000 people there. And then it just so turns out that the guy that they draft is in the green room. He gets to come out. And the guys on ESPN, I think it was probably 3 or 4 minutes that they didn't say anything. They just let the pictures tell the story.
I love that. And I feel like that doesn't happen as much. It happened with the Masters. The end of the Masters, they did such a good job of just letting you, they just walk with Rory and they just follow him and you can hear a little bit of what's being said, by him and the people around him, but they just let it go. And I love when that happens in those big sports moments because, there'll be times, you'll remember a great call, but rarely do you remember the babble that goes on in the moment after the great call on the big play. You don't need all of that often. And I feel like, especially to your point about, people talking over it throughout on NFL Network, I feel like now that a lot of people like to do these kind of simulcast or where they watch people watch things, which
I've
I
never
don't
understood that.
I don't do that.
I do not want to
much.
watch Pat McAfee watch football.
I don't either.
It doesn't do anything for me.
Corey does love the Manning cast, so we do watch the Manning cast. I don't love it, but I don't mind that much because I'm not usually that locked in on an NFL game anyway, so I don't really care that much.
I can handle the Manning cast maybe once or twice a year.
Yeah.
Like if the game is not any fun.
I like the Manning cast when they're teaching me things about
Or
football.
if they have
I don't like when they have a random person on there and they're just doing a podcast while a football game's on.
If they've got an interesting guest on there.
Yeah.
Like Bill Belichick came on there last year. That was kind of interesting. But yeah, I mean it's not like appointment television.
And I think a lot of people that's kind of growing in popularity, and people, our brains are so fried that we can't focus on one thing. We have to be inundated with the maximum amount of visual and auditory stimulus.
If you and I sat around and watched a Razorback football game and streamed ourselves doing it, how many people do you think would watch us watching a Razorback football game?
My parents, maybe.
Hey, look, we just got 4 viewers.
Honestly, I think there's a market for the kind of things that go on in the baseball press box, though, and you reading Pop Smoke lyrics the other day. I think
I got to keep myself entertained.
People would have paid to watch.
Here's what happens, by the way. I mean, don't make me sound too crazy. What happens is that these baseball players have just terrible walk-up music.
Matt's music commentary is frequent in the baseball press
It's
box.
awful.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say everybody's got awful music, but about 78% or more. And, I mean, literally every song that plays I shouldn't say every. I would say probably 9 out of every 10 songs that plays as a walk-up song or a walk-out song, the first time I hear it that season is the first time I hear it.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, okay, I wonder what this song is. And so, I might Shazam it, or I might hear a little line. I'll Google. Anyway, I'm just trying to figure out what they're listening to, and whew, there's some naughty lyrics being listened to by the Razorback baseball players, put it that way. But
just a few. But anyway, my point about the simultaneous, the people talking. I was talking about how you mentioned the NFL Network broadcast and how they're just talking over the whole thing, and I feel like part of that is because it's popular where people like to listen and watch people watch things, and so it doesn't really surprise me. But I personally like when, and I'm not somebody that pays that much attention to the calls of things. I'm not usually that locked in on who's
That's
announcing
what I geek out on.
Yeah, I'm not usually paying attention to it as closely, but I do notice when they do step back and when they let things like that kind of speak, and especially with football games, big plays. I like when you get to watch. You hear a crowd, you see reaction. I love stuff like that.
All right, Christina, appreciate you being here. We appreciate all of you joining us. We'll have a podcast again on Monday. Bubba Carpenter will be here in studio with me. We'll recap what we see from this Razorback baseball series against Florida. Again, a lot going on this weekend. Christina's going to be out at the track. There's an outdoor track meet here in Fayetteville. Ethan's going to be covering Razorback softball at Texas A&M, and the NFL draft going on as well. So busy weekend, even though we're kind of winding down in the sports here. Still a lot going on. You can read about all of it at wholehogsports.com. Have a great weekend, everybody. Hope to see you Monday.